Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Political Vigilante. I'm here with Jeff Epstein from Citizens Media TV. It's our monthly modern monetary theory conversation, which has been very helpful for me, and I'm learning more about it. But I think it's good that we're revisiting this because a lot of the stuff that we've talked about that you've told me is sort of stuck, and some of it hasn't. And you have also told me that you've been sort of refining your knowledge on it to help educate people. So I think it's, I think it's good because I could use some more refreshers because it is so mind blowing. I mean, it is so I catch myself just going back to the way I've thought for whatever.
Well, that's all you hear still, right? I mean, that's all you hear. So it's hard you get sucked back into that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, the stuff that is sticking with me is that, the national debt basically is a scam and taxes are theft because they don't, that's I've seen some people put it that kind of succinctly. Because they have the money to do all of this stuff. They don't even need our taxes. And that's the thing that's so mind-blowing, but also makes sense that they've created this whole system that's just been built on deceiving people for however long they've been doing it. And
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of, to just go in on a broader topic real quick before we get back into the specifics of, I think that's what is happening now in America and the world, is all of these old established things that are very corrupt and not good for us. Everything is sort of coming to a head. The two-party system, the dependence on fossil fuels, more and more people are waking up. When it isn't obvious that the planet is having a climate collapse, it's easy to argue, but now we're just seeing every summer it's hotter than last summer. The wildfires in California this summer are the worst they've ever been. Last summer they were the worst they've ever been.
Yeah, it's been particularly brutal here, and we're not usually brutal at all.
Yep.
I mean, it's sort of skirts the middle, but this summer has just been all like sauna. It's really been brutal.
I mean, and then you see stories like plastic just melting in the streets in Tokyo, and wildfires in Greece, and all this other stuff, and record heat. All you're hearing is record heat.
Kids starting to not go outside for recess.
Yep.
I think literally asphalt is going to start melting at some point. Yeah, it's obviously. I heard who was it? Patricia Pino. Mm-hmm. She's a MMT. She has an MMT podcast. She said some tweet of basically, they're not talking about climate change because they don't want to panic people, but it's as big of a deal as we think.
And that's the thing. It's just, this isn't going to get better. There's going to be climate related. There's going to be refugees. There's going to be all this. It's going to displace people. It's going to be really severe.
Well, I mean, you mentioned this in your super chat on whatever it was, Saturday, where, what do we do to fix this? And the federal job guarantee came up. And that's the kind of exact thing that this is geared towards, which is enormous projects that are not profitable, to employ people for things that are for the greater good, for the good of society, but are not profitable, aside from forgetting the conflict of, we got to get rid of the fossil fuel industry, forgetting that conflict from it. But, that is critical, where, you've said that there's nothing more important than climate change. And I agree with you. But we can't if we can't pass a federal job guarantee, for example, which is easily the biggest thing, then we're not going to be able to do anything about it. So it's really, money in politics is so closely linked to the climate crisis. So it's, you have to attack it from all these different angles.
I agree with that. So that end, let's get into now. How can modern monetary theory help us? The education of that and the ripping away the denial of that. How can that get us into attacking climate change? Because it'll take a lot of money to attack climate change too.
Well, I honestly don't think it's possible with our current politicians, because they are beholden to the fossil fuel industry.
Right.
So I don't see how that's going to change. I mean, like, they can say technology will save us, like taking carbon out of the atmosphere or whatever. I'm really not reassured by a company saying, "Oh, we'll take carbon out of the atmosphere," and then they mess up. And what's the consequences of them messing up? It's no longer just, we're losing some profits. Now it's going to be literally our lives are in the hands of these enormous corporations. So why don't we go back to the Conservation Corps? I don't remember what it was called, but during the end of the Depression, where they had a federal job guarantee, basically, and they planted 225 billion trees in like 3 years.
Right.
That is a solution. That's a step towards a significant solution that is not profitable. It actually just helps. There's no, we have to worry about it failing. I mean, that's just the kind of thing that is a real kind of solution. But they fight it. They really would rather have their industry and their profits than dare give the people this kind of power. So you asked, so how do we take the knowledge of modern money and do this? I think the ultimate answer is we don't have to stop. We don't have to fight the powerful. We don't have to take power from the powerful. We don't have to take our money, of course. We just have to stop fighting each other, and we have to start empowering each other. Because it's the depth of how they tear us apart is so effective that they stay in power. And until we start organizing, we've got to kick the corrupt people out. That is the first critical step. So, one interesting thing I actually learned this week is that HR 676, the Medicare for All bill, and I'm sure it's not the only one, but HR 676 is a beautiful bill. It's a great bill. Millions and millions of people really put their hopes into this bill, Medicare for All. And there's a poison pill in it. I just discovered there's a poison pill in it. There is a whole section of how do you pay for this bill, and normally it's just $3 trillion the first year, or $3 billion the first year, whatever it is. Each year, a specific number. But in this particular bill, it says we will raise these taxes by X, we will raise these taxes by Y, we will raise these taxes by X, we will raise these taxes by Y. And it's not necessary. And then there's a final line of, and we'll also just allocate whatever money necessary. And that's the only line that matters. All these other lines don't mean anything. So it's just the depth of how we are being scammed. I didn't know that it even went that deep. Because now the people who don't want their taxes raised are going to fight this tooth and nail. And then when it's implemented, if it's implemented, they will immediately try and sabotage it and water it down, because they're going to resent the fact that their taxes are going up, even though it makes no economic sense for it to do that. So I was surprised at that. That was really something very disappointing that I discovered, so that it goes even deeper than I thought it did.
Wow. Okay, so let's back up a second, though, and just get back into a MMT refresher for anybody watching for the first time. Maybe there's some people watching this that did not see our earlier videos from several months ago. And let's explain again to me and to the viewers what modern monetary theory is.
Okay, well, I'm going to give the pitch that I created, inspired by Ron Placone.
Okay.
He pushed me to create an elevator pitch, and I created one. So this is the pitch. Modern monetary theory, modern money, MMT, is the study of how our economy actually functions. Modern money shows why the powerful always get what they want, and why the people only get crumbs nothing at all, or even less than that. Modern money shows exactly how we can actually get the programs that we need to survive. It also shows that our government can easily give us these things tomorrow with little economic consequence, and could have given us these things decades ago. The powerful have always known modern money for war and tax breaks and so on. They just do it. But when it comes to healthcare and education and forgiving student debt and job guarantee, they suddenly forget about MMT. Suddenly it's, how are you going to pay for it? 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 And I came up with this saying that I like, which is MMT for the rich, rugged neoliberalism for the poor. So I'll say one more thing, and then I want to just ask you what you specifically remember, and then we'll go from there, which is I just want to remind people I am not a teacher. That is not my role. I'm not an expert. I'm not an economist. It is not appropriate for me to say that I'm a teacher and I'm teaching. I mean, obviously, to some extent I am. But my role is only to introduce. It is to unplug you from the matrix, hold your hand while you acclimate your eyes, and then send you off to the experts. That is my one and only job.
Okay.
So, I mean, that is quite a niche. So, but still, that is my job. So, well, I'll just start with the question, and you'll probably be able to just answer this quickly. So, why do we pay federal taxes? What are they used for? And I know that there's the answer that I would have gotten from you when we first met.
Right.
So, however you choose to answer that, why do we pay federal taxes, and what are they used for?
Well, I know now that the federal taxes, I mean, I used to think, we have to pay tax because that pays for federal programs and roads and schools and the military and all this other stuff. Now I know that actually it's just a means of kind of control. Taxes are to keep us beholden to the government and think that it's also like a psychological marketing in the sense that if I'm paying taxes, then I'll buy your, we don't have money for that.
So that last part again?
Well, like if I'm paying taxes, then it's easier for me, or it's easy for the government or those in power to make me believe that we don't. How are we going to pay for universal health care, and how are we going to pay for free college tuition? So it's almost used as a tactic.
Yeah. Okay. So So the big lie. This is the big lie. I don't think I said this last time. The big lie is that they want. I think that you just alluded to this. They want, the powers that be, the masters of the universe, want us to feel like money to us is exactly like money to the federal government. They want us to feel the anxieties that we feel in our own lives as if it's that same anxiety for the federal government. So the difference between a currency issuer and the currency users. They want us to pretend. They want to pretend that it's the same. They want to pretend that when they take out a loan, that they feel the same anxiety as when we take out a loan, when they borrow. So when we go to the bank and we say we need $100 for a loan, we immediately owe that bank $100 plus interest. There is no comparison on the federal government for that, because the purpose of the federal government is to compel the people to use the real resources at its disposal for the benefit of society. That's the purpose of a government. The more good faith, the more beneficial it is. Mm-hmm. But it's to compel the people to use their resources. And money is the incentive that replaces a gun to the head. So money is what the incentive that people get to do that. And so all of these things, the debt, the deficit, balanced budget, borrowing, surplus, all of these things, and natural unemployment, that's incredibly sinister one. All of these things are sub-lies based on the big lie. So they want us, when they talk about debt, they want us to feel that anxiety. If we went to a bank and got a loan. When deficit, they want us to feel that anxiety and not push and look farther at what it's actually supposed to be. So, So I'll just go on to the next question that I normally ask, which is, and I'm sure you'll be able to answer this one as well, where does money come from?
Well, now I know that the Congress issues, I mean, the Federal Reserve issues currency. It doesn't come from, and it's not based on, since when Nixon took us off the gold standard, it's not based on anything. It's a fiat currency.
Correct.
So
Correct.
That's where it comes from.
It comes from the Congress, the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8. So the Congress writes a number in a bill, and it's really, I have a screenshot from one of the bills that Elizabeth Warren is proposing. It just says 2.9 billion for year one, 2.9 trillion for year two, 2. And so on, just for 10 years. That's writing a number into a bill, signing it into law, and then that money is born. It exists because they want it to exist. And I compare it to, you choose to increase the numbers on the scoreboard. A child chooses to draw, on a piece of construction paper. It exists because they want it to exist. And there's some mechanics, the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, and so on. But that's what it is. Congress creates the money because they want to. So monopoly currency is sure. They can create as much as they want, whenever they want, for whatever they want, and they're the only ones that are allowed to do it. So for them, money is potentially infinite. They could generate it at an infinite clip if they wanted to. Of course, that would be incredibly foolish to do, but the level of flexibility of what we are told is dramatically different from their actual, range of flexibility that they have. So to review, fiat currency, Japan, Australia, Canada, England, New Zealand, European Union are all fiat currencies. Aside from the European Union, this all became true in August of 1971 when Nixon took us off of the standard. So currency users, everyone except the federal government, me, you, families, companies, states, cities, other countries, China and Russia, and so on. And the question, which you now know the answer to, is if you are the federal government and you can create the money as much as you want, whenever you want, for whatever you want, and you're the only one that's allowed to do it, you and I, as people, need income before we spend. We have to get the money from somewhere else. If you're the federal government and you can create the money, do you need income? Do you need to get the money from anyone or anything else? You don't. You don't. So that means that you don't need to get it from China. You don't need to get it from taxpayers. And if you don't need to get it from anyone or borrow it from anybody, then that means by definition that the debt is not what we think it is. The national debt is not what we think it is. What does it mean to be in debt if you are in that position? So the whole concept of debt just disappears, knowing that. The whole concept of the national debt disappears. And so I'll remind you of the big phrase, which is federal taxes do not fund federal spending. Federal spending funds federal taxes. We do not fund the government funds us, because we can't pay taxes until we first get the dollar from the government.
Right. So then it begs I'm sure somebody watching this is asking this question. So then what is the purpose of the national debt?
To scare the hell out of us.
Right. Right.
To scare the hell out of us. Because I'll tell you, I don't mind jumping around a little bit, because what comes to mind is the purpose of the government is to compel the people to use their natural resources for the benefit of society. Money is the incentive. That's what deficit spending is. Deficit spending, by definition, means that you're giving value to your people. Why would you not want to do that? You have to do that if you want a society, because you have to have people pay taxes. So they have to have value in order to pay taxes with. Mm-hmm. And they have to have value in order to buy things and invest and save and function, just survive. So a deficit gives value to the people. And it is not an exaggeration to say that if you don't have a deficit, a national deficit, you can't have a society. Society would break down because you are never giving your people value. You are choking them off from the government if you never deficit spend. And the debt is just the accumulation of that. So the deficit is each year. You give $100 each year, $100 each year for 10 years. Now you have a debt of $100 aside from the taxes that are taken out. Mm-hmm. So the debt is just the accumulation of the deficit. The debt is our value. The debt is the accumulation of every American citizens plus China and Russia, all currency users, our investments, our saving, our investments, our bank accounts, and our wallets. It's our value. So it's nonsensical to consider, number one, being in debt. It's nonsensical to think about paying it back. Who would you pay it back to if you've never borrowed from anyone to begin with? So.
Right.
And actually, I just heard a news story where it was saying the whole world has like $220 trillion in debt, and it's like, who's the Bank of the Earth? Who's above Earth? Who do we pay? My joke is the Decepticons in outer space. I mean, who do we owe it to?
Right.
So, I can go on if you have something to give input. Okay.
Keep going.
Okay. So the Pony for All Act of 2018. So now we're going to just blow through this because you know exactly what. Mm-hmm. You and I are congressmen, and we are going to write this bill to give everyone a horse. Let's be more inclusive of less progressive people. A horse. And it's a ridiculous scenario, but let's really do this. We'll set aside money. Money's not an object. Government is not corrupt. Trump's going to sign it, and we have the best people at our disposal. What does it take to give every single person in the country a horse? And I'll say it again. I can just answer for you. But what does it take to create our current population with the current population of horses and make it so that we can give everyone a horse?
Oh, right. We would have to then go into all of the ancillary businesses for the horses, the feed, the transportation of the horses to get them everywhere, and then everyone has to have a stable and riding a gear and all this stuff. So then there's all these other businesses that then have to, this whole infrastructure of giving 300 million horses to America has to come into place.
Right, and the critical one, the most critical piece, is we have to get these horses to reproduce a lot. Right. And that has consequences of all these ancillary industries and building all these things and educating all these people and all these new veterinarians and so on. Right. And then on a smaller scale, we have to train the people to get them, and so they know how to take care of them, to prepare their house for it. And all of these things, horseshoes and fencing and veterinarian services, all of that needs to be done on a micro scale for the people all over the place. So the point is, well, an excellent consequence is that this creates a lot of good business for people. Right. And they make a lot of money out of this. But that's not what's most important. The most important point is that money doesn't change biological processes. So nothing is going to change the fact that a horse has whatever it is, a gestation period of 9 months, and that a mommy pony has to wait 2 months after that to do it again. No amount of money is going to change that. No amount of money can change that. No amount of money can change how fast we can educate people. No amount of money can change how how fast it's going to take to distribute and create all the infrastructure to do that all around the country. So the point is that we can throw $10 trillion at it and force it to say, let's say it actually would take 20 years, but let's say we're idiots and we say, what's going to happen in 5 years? Here's $10 trillion, make it happen, I don't care what it takes to make it work. And it would cause enormous problems because there is nothing that we can do to change the biological processes. Right. There is nothing that we can do. And in fact, I thought that it would cause utter chaos, that if we threw this money in. And to some extent it would put pressure on the politicians who promised it. It would put pressure on the breeders who are now under this to do this unrealistic thing. It would be upsetting to the people who want their horses when they said. But beyond that, it actually would not cause chaos for the economy. Because I just learned that if you don't have the one way that you can create chaos economically, the government could just create chaos, is to give every person $1 million. To give every person just a check without any requirements at all, like UBI. Right. You just get a check. No requirements, no output required, no nothing. So if we gave everyone $1 million, that would be really detrimental. But if we get it in a law where the law says, if we're smart, that the law says you must use this money in order to implement this law, so you can't just spend the extra money, then that money is just going to sit in their bank account because the horses can't reproduce any faster. I mean, maybe they might start scrambling. Let's call Germany and try and import some horses there. But no matter what they do, that money is going to go to this particular project. And it's not that the money would cause economic chaos. It would cause chaos within that population of people that I mentioned, politicians and so on. But it would not cause economic chaos. It would just not work. It would just not work.
Right. Because it would just be too. It's not. You can't get around, like you were saying. You can't get around the biological time frame and all that other stuff.
Correct. So that's it. So the point is that demonstrates that real resources are what's critical. It is not the money. Money does not matter to the federal government. The federal government doesn't have money. The federal government doesn't not have money. Neither of those things make sense, because when the government creates money, it is in one direction only, for going to a currency user. It is not ever held by the federal government itself. So just a reminder of a term, which is called productive capacity. It's our capacity to produce, which is just another way of saying real resources are the only things that matter. So why are taxes used for real? And I'll just list them off. There's 3 reasons of it. So number 1 is to drive the currency. It is you go to jail if you don't pay your taxes, period. That drives the currency because now people have to get jobs in order to get that currency and so on. Okay, that's the purpose. And then the second purpose, the second use is to control demand, which was the example of war bonds. So in World War II, when we were temporarily off the gold standard, all the resources would not go to cars anymore. Now go to the war. And now this demand is way too much compared to supply. The demand for cars was the same. The supply of cars just fell off to nothing. Right. So how did they solve this problem? Because you must do one of 2 things. You must increase supply or decrease demand. Those are the only 2 options. And during the war, you cannot increase supply. You just can't do it. Right. So they did war bonds. That we chose to give a carrot to entice people to stop buying cars. We could also use a stick, such as a law or a penalty or taxes or whatever it is. Right. So we removed money from the economy, which reduced demand. And we compelled them to do this, enticed them to do this with patriotism, right. which worked. But what is important to understand is that money, when it goes to the government, is not held by the government. It disappears. It disappears if it's a 10-year bond for 5% interest. It disappears for 10 years. So when you pay your taxes $1,000, you say $1,000 on your tax return, you put in your tax return, and they see $1,000 in your tax return. And they go in, that authorizes them through your bank to go into your bank account and lower it by $1,000. Nothing happens on their side. Right. The money disappears. And same with war bonds. But the only difference is that 10 years later, war bonds, they create the currency to pay you back, 1,000 plus whatever it is, 5%. So that concept of the money disappears, so that the country does not have and does not have money. I mean, the federal government. It is not true to say that they have money. It is not true to say that they don't have money. So, okay, next thing.
Yes.
Last thing is imposing moral decisions. So this is more on a state, local scale, these particular examples that I'm giving, but the concept is still accurate.
Let me go back real quick to the war bonds
Please.
thing. Is there anything that you can point to that the government is doing today that is specific to the war bonds? I mean, obviously that's part of what you're saying taxes are, is pulling money out of the economy.
Well, they are still selling bonds, but I am not really sure why. Because bonds to the people were, I'm not exactly sure, I might have this off for a minute, but when we were on the gold standard, they really did have to regulate how much money was in the economy because it legally had to be matched to the amount of gold that we have. Because if you increase the supply, then that actually does decrease the value of that money. So bonds was a way of saying there's too much money, here's some bonds, please buy it, because we are risking people coming and redeeming their gold too quickly. So we can't have that. So we'll pay you 5%. People might say, no, I don't want that. Okay, fine, 10%. We really need you to do this. But as far as today, there's really not much reason to sell bonds except to enrich the powerful in corporations and countries, because they'll buy a bond, which will make them a little bit of interest, and they'll just keep turning it over into new bonds and so on and so on and so on. Okay. They can afford to do that. But as far as specifically how they use bonds today, beyond that, I'm actually not sure of the answer.
Okay.
So imposing moral decisions, so we can increase taxes to discourage behavior like smoking and gambling and alcohol and so on. We can discourage polluting behavior by jacking it up a lot, so the level that we want to do it. Same with the opposite side. We can lower taxes to promote gym memberships or solar panels or electric cars and so on. So taxes are critical to society. They really are critical to society. In fact, it's like we require oxygen to breathe. And if we don't have oxygen, we can't afford to pay our bills. But we have bigger problems. We're dead. So it really doesn't matter that we can't pay our bills because we're dead. And taxes are the same thing for the government. Taxes are the lifeblood of a government, that they don't pay for things. And it is true that if we don't collect federal taxes, or if all the people collectively say we're not going to pay taxes anymore, then our society, yes, it is true that the federal government wouldn't be able to fund things, but the federal government wouldn't exist anymore. So it really doesn't matter. Okay. It's actually the lifeblood of our economy, that if we didn't collect federal taxes, society wouldn't exist. So, and I mentioned there really is nothing stopping us aside from corruption of just writing a $4.5 trillion bill and giving it to eliminate the fossil fuel industry. There really is nothing stopping that, except for, people, the politicians are paid off by people.
Right.
So, and then the final thing with taxes is just a reminder of, we discourage inequality by taxing the rich. And that, they extract from us at some point, and then they create the laws. They buy the politicians and create the laws. So we need to stop that. So we must tax them so they're not that powerful. But the big reveal, which was really great the first time, which was we don't tax them because we need their money. We don't reduce the military because we need their money. And actually, I have a question for you. Is it still hard for you to get your mind around, we need to reduce the military because we should be using that money for the people? Like, I've seen you maybe struggle a little bit with that. So I'd like to ask you about that.
Yeah, it is. It is still.
Actually, forgive me. Let me add one thing to that.
Okay.
I see you and other people struggle with the anxiety, with the frustration, and the of, it is such a shame that they choose to do this, because think of what we could do with that money. And even though that's not economically accurate, that they just choose not to create the money for us, but that emotion is real. And I'm actually struggling with how to replace that emotion, because it's a very valid emotion, but as far as how to make that economically accurate is actually really tough for me to sort of get my mind around.
Well, yeah, that's the struggle here, is because, okay, even now with this knowledge we have of modern monetary theory, it's still wrong that they're spending this much money on war. It's just still wrong. And they yes, they could write a $4.5 trillion check. They could also just take half of that money that they're spending on war and spend it elsewhere. They could still do that. You know what I mean? So I'm very adamant that I don't want this much money spent on war. That's simple, because when you spend that kind of money on war, then you need to justify war. It's like the private prison industry. They need prisoners. So they, that's why 3 strikes you're out got passed. I mean, it's because so you get caught holding a plant 3 times, you're going to jail because the private prison industry benefits from that. The military-industrial complex benefits from that.
And I understand even judges somewhat benefit from that.
Yeah, of course. Like,
yeah.
It's part of the class warfare, the private prison industry, because if you have money and you get arrested, you can hire a good lawyer. If you don't, you've got to go with a public defender, and they're just going to tell you to plead it out. And even if you're innocent, now you're pleading guilty to get less jail time.
Yeah. I remember hearing that recently.
So then now guess what? Now you have a criminal record, and now you're in the system.
And even more easily to get next time, yeah.
Yep. And now it's harder to get a job when you come out. And there you go. There's recidivism. There it is. So,
yeah.
I don't, even with this new knowledge of where money comes from and who issues it, I still don't want to spend $700 billion on war. It's just
I think it actually might make sense to, I mean, that is completely valid. And I don't think that needs to change at all. But I think it's actually 2 problems. I think if you separate it out to 2 problems, that I don't want to be the bullies of the world. I don't want to be the bullies of the world. We shove countries against the wall and demand their lunch money.
Yeah.
But we can't. Actually, let me not forget this. We can't just immediately reduce our military. We just can't, because we've been bullies for so long that if we just reduced it, then that would be a very bad thing. We need to reduce it, but it has to be done responsibly and over time, because we've been so horrible for so long. Mm-hmm. So that's one side. Yes, it is just a travesty that we spend so much on war. But it is an even bigger travesty that they choose not to spend money on us when they could even more easily do so, irrespective of that. And I even one thing I've learned since the first time we spoke is that if we started getting these programs like Medicare for All, if we got Medicare for All, like, again, we don't have to fight the rich. We just have to stop fighting ourselves. We don't have to take power from the rich. We just have to start empowering ourselves. So if we got Medicare for All, that would immediately transfer power from the powerful to us. Immediately. That's why they don't want us to have it. Federal job guarantee would immediately transfer power, even more power, a lot more power, from them to us. But that's how we can do it, is by joining and just demanding what we deserve and not worry about them. And this might cause, over time, the war machine to have to be reduced. But who's to say that it shouldn't be reduced? It could be, even in its current form, it could be more moral, and it could be more efficient. So we could still have this insane military, but could we do it more efficiently and still have a ton more resources available? Could we do it more morally? These decisions are going to be forced. Their hand is going to be forced once we get, these programs for us, that they're going to have to do some shuffling behind the scenes of real resources in order to make these things happen.
Yeah, I think for me, this is all tied together in the sense that, the Green New Deal, which is the solution for the climate disaster that we're currently in, and it's, as we were talking about at the top of the show, it's only going to get worse. For me, the diversion, so So we have this massive global military. We're in whatever 180 countries or whatever. We have bases all over the world. We could then mobilize the military to help with climate change.
Exactly. We could we can refit our military, not just immediately decrease it, because that's not a good idea, but we could repurpose it to be positive and prove to the world, earn their trust over time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a way of making our military more moral.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so just a reminder of all the terms. Debt, deficit, borrowing. So the debt, I'll say, I don't think I said this particularly the first time. The definition of the debt, the national debt, is the total amount of money since the country began, spent into the economy by the federal government since the country began, that has not yet been taxed back. And that's the technical definition. And I'll say an easy one in a moment. I'll say that one more time. The national debt is the total money spent into the economy by the federal government since the country began that has not yet been taxed back. So every year is a deficit, and that accumulates, and that becomes a debt. The easy way to understand it is the total of every American citizen's plus China and all currency users. Every American citizen's investments, bank accounts, and wallets. It's our value. So the national debt, I think, should be called our national value. A lot of other people say it should be called our national savings. But that is the accurate term. And why would we want to pay back our value? That just makes no sense. So again, borrowing, technically what borrowing means is like if I go into a store and I purchase a soda and they give me that soda, it's like when I go to the federal government and I'll purchase a bond and they'll give me the paper for that bond. And they destroy the money because they don't need it. They destroy it. That's called, from the federal government's point of view, that's called borrowing my money. So even though the money disappears and they never use it, that's what borrowing is to the federal government. And that's what happens when China does it. $1 trillion, $5 trillion. They borrow $5 trillion from China, and they maybe send over some cars or whatever. And that money is destroyed. They give them a piece of paper, and that's called borrowing from China. And so we pay back the national debt. What does that mean? When and if China redeems their bonds, we create the currency to give them their money back. What do they use that for? To purchase things. That's not a bad thing.
Right.
And even if it is a bad thing, we have infinite tools to deal with it. Changing laws, regulations, taxing them, whatever it is. So that's the debt. And the deficit and the deficit, balance, budget, and surplus. I'll just go through this quickly. So I budget it, me and you. Again, it's the big lie. Federal government is exactly the same as us. That's the big lie. I budget $100 for the week. I spent $100 this week for everything. Perfectly budgeted. I was fiscally responsible. Surplus. I only spent $85. I could take my wife to a movie. I was fiscally responsible, even more responsible. Deficit. I had to dip into savings. I had to use a credit card because I had to spend an extra $20. I was irresponsible. I had a deficit. And then opposite world for the federal government. The purpose of the federal government is to compel the people to use its real resources for the benefit of society. Money is the incentive that they give us to do so. It is a completely different relationship. For a balanced budget, they spend $100 into the economy to implement some law. They do that thing, they get that money, and then in April they tax all 100 back. I mean, this is very simplistic. Doesn't exactly, this it happens over time and multiple stuff. But they spend $100 into the economy, they tax all $100 back. It makes no sense. It is no different than putting a gun to their heads. People are slaves. They are forced into credit. They are forced to dip into their savings. They are forced to use bank loans just to survive because all of their money that they're given from the government is used to pay taxes. A surplus is even worse than that. They spend 100 into the economy. They tax back 120. So now I have to dip into my savings or get credit card or get a bank loan just to pay my taxes, let alone survive, let alone buy what I need for my family. And then the deficit. I spend $100 into the economy, I only tax 30 back. So the people have $70 in their pockets, which they can spend and save and invest and buy stuff and pay their taxes.
Right.
They have money left over. So a deficit is our national income. It's the people's income.
Okay.
But that term deficit is used to scare people. That's what all these things are used for, to hook it into the big lie to scare people.
Right.
So Social Security. Social Security, we're stealing from Social Security, borrowing from Social Security. It's going to go broke in 3 years earlier than we thought. But there is no pot of money to go broke for no federal program. There is no pot of money to go broke. There is no pot of money to empty. There's no money to steal from, because every time benefits are paid, the currency is created.
Right.
Social Security agency tells based on the law, all of the formulas in the law tell them how much benefits to pay. They inform the Treasury. The Treasury creates a currency. How do you steal from something like that? You don't. But you sabotage it by saying it's going broke, because the only way for it to go broke is for the Congress to choose to change the law to compel the Social Security agency to pay less and less benefits. Mm. That's how it goes broke. And the sabotage, and then looking back a few years later and saying, oh, it broke, we've got to privatize it, and coincidence, I get to profit off of it. It's choking the people off of government, forcing them into bank loans and credit cards, reducing.
And privatization, as you just said. Anytime I hear privatization, I know the 1%ers are going to make more profit.
I think that's by definition.
Yeah. I
think that's by definition.
It's never going to help us. It'll only help them. I mean, like...
No, it's not, and it's not even neutral. It's extracting from us.
Yeah.
It's extracting from us. We're not even human. I mean, we're not even human in that point of view. Lost track of it. So, the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, the 1985 law, actually, so they give these good estimates of, every major bill that's passed. They give these good estimates. And there is good information in there. But it's all framed in scaremongering, because the 1985 law passed during the Reagan administration compelled the CBO to use scaremongering, saying when it's going to go broke, saying that the debt's going out of control, saying that the deficit there's blowing a hole in the deficit. The CBO is compelled to frame their reports in scaremongering. If you can get beyond that, then there's good information. But it's not like they're bad people. The law tells them that they have to do this.
Right.
Yeah, that blows my mind. It's just like, it's even a level deeper. It goes even deeper than that. They've prepared for, if we win this round, that all of the next steps are already prepared. So the United States dollar is not a thing. It's just a unit of measurement. It's no different than $1 a pound, again, an Australian dollar. It's no different than a quart, a gallon, or a millimeter. It's no different than a pound or a kilogram or a ton. It's no different than inches and so on. You don't run out of, you can measure the distance between Philly and Chicago. You're not going to run out of feet. It makes no sense to say that.
Right.
You don't run out of your measuring object. And it's hard to even get my mind around, but money is just a measuring unit of measurement for debts and obligations and things.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like, we don't see money for what it is. We see money as a thing. Right. And actually, a viewer of Ron Placone asked if I could look into petrodollar, and I looked into it a little bit. And the petrodollar is also not a thing. It's just a decision, a deal that, actually, I'll go back to my first page. I wrote that stuff down. It is a deal made between the United States and Saudi Arabia that we use the dollar, that they must, if you want oil from them, you have to use the dollar. And it's this big scare thing. Actually, do you have a conception of what the petrodollar is? before I say what I've learned?
My conception of it is basically this: is that we, oil has to be traded, bought, and sold using the U.S. dollar, and countries that have said anytime somebody says they don't want to use the dollar anymore. Saddam said that, he got killed. Gaddafi said that, he got killed. So Iran just switched to the euro, and all of a sudden they've got weapons of mass destruction there. Venezuela doesn't want to use it, and they're a bunch of socialists. So that's my understanding of the petrodollar.
Okay, and I think that's generally correct. But I don't hear that much. I don't really look for this kind of thing. But like Ron Pacone and Jimmy Dore say, I've seen videos, not just by them, but I've seen videos that say that it is a really doom and gloom kind of a thing, that the dollar is based on oil, like it used to be based on gold.
Right.
So if it's pegged to oil, if our currency is pegged to oil, then that means that if we get rid of the fossil fuel industry, does our economy crash? And that puts us in quite a bad position if we're put in to have to make that choice, to either save our ability to live on the planet or save the United States economy.
Yeah, that's the thing that I've mentioned numerous times, and I mentioned this speech that was given 3 years ago by the governor of the Bank of England, and he saw this. He calls it the carbon bubble, which is, as you say, it's the global economy is based on oil and fossil fuels in general, but mainly oil. And he said, we need to figure out a way to deflate this bubble slowly so that it doesn't burst, because if it bursts, we're going to have a global economic collapse.
I don't know. Well, I don't know. I don't know enough. But what I believe is, I don't think it's the economics that is the problem. I think it's just the fact that we're so dependent on fossil fuels. I don't mean economically. I just mean everything we use is based on fossil fuels.
Everything.
So we would have a collapse from that point of view. I'm not so sure about the economic side, but just the one thing I do know about petrodollar is that it has absolutely zero to do with any country's ability to provide for its people. It has some foreign relation implications, which I don't quite understand yet. It definitely has that. It enriches international corporations, and I think it's more of a reflection of the powerful corporations to just try and extend their reach out into the entire world, not just the United States. But it does not affect the United States' ability. If the petrodollar disappeared, if it was all of a sudden different currencies, the United States' ability, or Australia's ability, Japan's ability to provide for its people doesn't change, because the only thing that affects that is our real resources.
Right. And
oil doesn't change our real resources. Nothing can change our real resources. If we have a conflict, for example, then maybe that might have an indirect effect. But nothing changes our real resources, and the fact that we only accept our currency for tax obligations. So those are the two things. So it's basically, it's not scary at all. It has some foreign implications, but for us, it is not scary at all.
Okay.
So racism. Racism is a tool to tear the people apart. That's all it is. Xenophobia is a tool to tear the people apart. Blame the powerless instead of the powerful that chose to hire them. They're stealing our jobs. Classism. You're poor, you're worse than me. You're not as good as me. It's a tool to tear the people apart. And same with, I'm sure there's other examples that I can't think of. Homosexuality, that's not the right term. But all of these different things. Homophobia. Tools to tear the people apart. Economic ignorance is a tool to tear the people apart. That's all it is. It's a tool to tear the people apart. And it is pushed by our government, our education system, our media, and our so-called experts. Pushed by every single one of them. And even our amazing bills, HR 676 even pushes it. The things that could possibly save the world even has that in it. So it makes everybody fight with everybody. And an element that I didn't realize when I first talked with you which now really I totally understand, is that I originally said that it pits the powerless against the powerful. But it really doesn't. Like, we can say that I must get the money from the rich. I either have to wrest it from their cold dead hands with pitchforks, or I have to beg for it. But that's not really who we fight. We fight the people who think that that's crazy. How dare you penalize the powerful? Or not powerful. How dare you penalize success?
Right.
They're the ones that create the jobs. So we're fighting them. And same with military. We want to reduce the military. We're not fighting the military. We're fighting the people who are defense hawks. How dare you jeopardize our troops? How dare you jeopardize our national defense? We're fighting them. And then the big one that I didn't realize at first is that our progressive programs scare the bejesus out of everybody, and there's a lot of people that are afraid of raised taxes. Your program will raise my taxes.
Yeah.
I don't care what your program is. I am against it, because I will not let myself go bankrupt with raised taxes for your program. I will not let my family go bankrupt. I won't let my country go bankrupt. Mm-hmm. I'm against it just out of principle. I like healthcare. I like education, but not if it causes raised taxes, because I am terrified, genuinely terrified of raised taxes. And you actually helped me come up with this idea, which is the earth is flat. They are convinced that the earth is flat. They are convinced they're going to fall off the edge of the earth into the economic cliff, so much so that they won't even put a foot inside of the boat. When we tell them there's no edge, just go and consider that and take a look. So we are fighting, progressives fight those who are terrified of taxes. And also the final element, which is people like me who want to push more money, for progressives and for centrists, do believe that taxes are going to go up. And we're actually fighting each other. It is a perfect storm of making everybody fight everybody.
Yeah. Because it's the thing that they do. If we all get together and realize that they're all scamming us and tricking us and wanting us fighting with each other, then their power ends. Then their control over us ends. But if we're divided in red state, blue state, and you're an MMT weirdo or whatever the thing is, then they're still winning. The election system is rigged, I'm not going to vote or whatever. That they're winning. So,
yeah.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much, man. Again, these conversations are extremely helpful for me, and I hope they're helpful for anybody out there watching. Any final thoughts? I mean, you kind of wrapped it up a little bit, but anything before we go?
Just a reminder, we do not need to actually, if I may just bring up one last thing.
Sure.
And then I'll close it out. Natural unemployment. I want to describe this term. So federal job guarantee is a public competitor to private industry.
Right.
Which means that it forces them to change their behavior, which means that the people can stand up to their bosses. That's a big deal. And natural unemployment is the concept of we can't go below 3%, because below that will cause runaway inflation. They've never actually tried it, but that's what the theory is. But what the truth is that natural unemployment is actually a choice to not go below that, because if they go below that and they get closer to zero, it is effectively a federal job guarantee. And that is what underlies the core of their strategy, which is to prevent a federal job guarantee because it keeps them in power, because the people can't stand up to them. And that's where killing unions comes from. Yeah. That's where part-time jobs come from. That's where suppressed wages come from. That's where they say produce 50 hours and 40 hours of work. It gets them to be able to screw the people in that way. So natural unemployment is particularly sinister. So just a reminder of what the answer is. The answer is we have to get corrupt politicians out of office. And we do not have to do it by taking power from the power. We don't have to take power from the powerful. We don't have to take money from the powerful. We just have to empower ourselves. And for me, that means learning the reality of how this works. We should disagree on policy. There's nothing wrong with that. But we really have to stop disagreeing on the reality of how things work.
That's a great point, and it's valid. I think you know, a lot of other people have said similarly, like if we're going to fix the environment, we've got to get corrupt politicians out of there. We got to get the money out of politics, and as you're saying, add this knowledge of modern monetary theory. So I really appreciate your time and bringing up everything and being a Patreon supporter. And everybody out there watching, please go to Citizens Media TV. You can see more of their information that Jeff is doing. And also, you too can be a Patreon supporter. Go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood, and you can support this show and have interviews like this and have really cool discussions.
Thank you, Graham.